Hey, Lynn, can you pick up Dad's medication on your way over? And don't forget the dessert you promised. Oh, and Megan's gluten-free now, so nothing with wheat. My sister Rachel's voice carried that familiar, commanding tone that left no room for discussion. I stared at my phone, the grocery bags already cutting into my fingers, the cake I'd spent 3 hours baking sitting in a box on the passenger seat, the cake that would now apparently go uneaten because no one had bothered to tell me about Megan's new dietary restriction until this moment. Sure, Rach. I'll figure something out, I replied, swallowing the frustration that had become my constant companion. 15 years ago, I was Lynn Pearson, the rising marketing director at Colburn and Associates in Pittsfield. Now I was just Lynn, the reliable one, the fixer, the family cushion who absorbed everyone's falls while remaining invisible until needed. The decision hadn't seemed difficult at the time. Brian had received an incredible offer to take over his father's insurance business in Waltham. The twins, Emma and Aiden, were only 3 then, and Brian's income alone could support us if I stayed home with them. Just for a few years, he'd promised. Then you can jump back in wherever you want. A few years turned into 15, and wherever you want became if you can. I pulled into the pharmacy drive-thru, adding Dad's prescription to the mounting list of errands I'd been tasked with before the big family dinner. My parents' 45th anniversary, and somehow I'd been appointed the unpaid event coordinator, chef, and personal shopper. As I waited for the prescription, I scrolled through my email, deleting promotional messages, and ignoring the LinkedIn notifications that had once excited me. Then I stopped at a subject line, reaching out from Colburn and Associates. My heart skipped. Jessica Martinez, my former colleague and now the CMO, had written, "Lynn, I hope this finds you well. I've been following your freelance projects on the side, and I'm impressed. We've just landed the Berkshire Regional Tourism account, and I thought of you immediately. Would you consider coming back? Full remote if needed, flexible hours. Let's talk." I stared at the message until the pharmacy technician tapped on my window. "Mrs. Pearson, your father's medication." She handed me the white paper bag with a sympathetic smile I'd seen too many times. I was a regular, the dutiful daughter who picked up everyone's prescriptions. "Thanks, Diane," I said, recognizing her from my countless visits. "No problem. How's he doing?" "Better, thanks. The new medication seems to be helping." But as I drove away, the weight of the lie settled on me. Dad wasn't better. He'd been using his heart condition to keep us all orbiting around him, especially me. The doctor had told me privately that his condition was stable, had been for years. But Dad liked the attention, and Mom liked having me over several times a week to check on him. I pulled into Sweetwater Bakery, a small place I discovered during one of my rare moments of free time. The owner, Margie, greeted me with a smile as I walked in. "The usual coffee, Lynn?" "Actually, Margie, I need a favor. Do you have anything gluten-free I could pass off as homemade?" She raised an eyebrow. "Family dinner? My parents' anniversary. Say no more?" She disappeared into the back and returned with a small, elegant cake. "Almond flour chocolate cake. I was going to put it out this afternoon, but it's yours." "You're a lifesaver," I said, pulling out my wallet. "On the house." She waved away my money. "Just promise me you'll take that marketing class you've been talking about." I'd forgotten I'd mentioned it to her, a 6-week digital marketing refresher course I'd been eyeing at the community college. "I don't know if I'll have time," I said, the excuse automatic. "Make time," she said firmly. "Whatever you have to shuffle around, whatever you have to say no to, make time." Her words followed me back to the car, echoing Jessica's email. Make time. Say no. 2 things I'd forgotten how to do. By the time I arrived at my parents' house in the quiet suburb of Lenox, my mind was spinning with possibilities, calculations, and the heavy weight of 15 years of compromise. The front lawn needed mowing. I made a mental note to remind Brian to help Dad with it before we left. Inside, the familiar scent of Mom's perfume mixed with decades of cooking smells. The house was a monument to my childhood, untouched by time, except for the growing collection of grandchildren's photos. "There she is." My father's booming voice greeted me from his recliner. At 70, he still commanded attention, though his once robust frame had thinned considerably. "Sorry I'm late." "Had to make a gluten-free dessert run for Megan," I said, setting down the bags and giving him a kiss on the cheek. Oh, she's not actually gluten-free, my mother called from the kitchen. She just read some article about inflammation last week. Of course. I found my mother choreographing dinner preparations, a familiar dance of pots and pans. Lynn, thank goodness. Rachel's running late and your brother won't be here until dinner? Can you finish the salad and check on the roast? Oh, and Brian called. He's bringing the twins directly from their activities. No hello. No how are you. No thank you for the 6 bags of groceries you just carried in alone. Sure, Mom, I said, washing my hands and taking up my assigned post. Mom bustled around me, occasionally touching my arm in that way she had, a quick, bird-like gesture that was her version of affection. I don't know what I'd do without you, she said, but it wasn't gratitude. It was expectation wrapped in sentiment. I chopped vegetables with mechanical precision, my mind drifting back to the days when I'd managed marketing campaigns for clients across New England. I'd been good at it. Creative, strategic, respected. The last campaign I'd led before leaving had won a regional advertising award. Did you remember to pick up your father's prescription? Mom's voice cut through my thoughts. Yes, it's in my purse. And did you call the Hendersons to confirm for the brunch next Sunday? I paused, mid-chop. The Hendersons? You didn't mention that. Her face crinkled with disappointment. I'm sure I told you. They're Dad's oldest friends, and they're only in town for the weekend. I thought we'd have them over before they head back to Florida. Mom, I can't do next Sunday. I promised Emma I'd help her with her college applications. Well, surely Brian can help her with that. The Hendersons specifically asked if you'd be here. They always loved your apple tart. And there it was, the assumption that whatever plans I had were negotiable, that my time belonged to whoever claimed it first, that saying no wasn't an option. Before I could respond, the front door flew open, and a tornado of noise swept in as my brother Jason arrived with his family. His wife Courtney hugged me warmly, the only person who seemed genuinely happy to see me rather than the tasks I would complete. Need help? She whispered. Always, I replied, handing her a knife and a pile of tomatoes. Jason wandered in, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and leaned against the counter. Smells amazing in here, he said, making no move to assist. Your sister's been here for an hour already, getting everything ready, Mom said, a hint of accusation in her voice. Jason shrugged. That's why Lynn's the favorite. She's so good at all this domestic stuff. I bit my tongue. The favorite label was his way of abdicating responsibility, of justifying why he never helped. In reality, being the favorite just meant being the most useful, the most accessible, the one who never said no. 2 hours later, the house filled with even more family chaos. Rachel swept in with her husband Michael and their daughter Megan, immediately commanding attention with stories of Megan's latest dance recital and their recent weekend in the Berkshires. You should have seen her, Mom. First position perfect, back straight as an arrow. The instructor said she's the most promising student in the class. Megan, 12 and already developing her mother's talent for center stage, demonstrated a pirouette in the middle of the kitchen, narrowly missing the platter of appetizers I'd just arranged. Careful, honey, I cautioned. Oh, let her show off a little, Rachel said dismissively. It's not like anything got knocked over. Not yet, I thought. Brian finally arrived with our twins, now lanky 18-year-olds, more interested in their phones than helping with dinner. They mumbled hellos, grabbed sodas from the fridge, and disappeared to the basement with their cousins. Traffic was a nightmare, Brian said, kissing my cheek absently. Did you bring my sport coat? I texted you about it. I hadn't seen any text. No, you didn't mention it. He frowned, pulling out his phone. I could have sworn, looks like it didn't go through, damn service out here. It was a familiar excuse, one I'd stopped questioning years ago. The never-sent text, the call that mysteriously dropped, the email that landed in spam, all part of the fabric of small evasions that made up our marriage. Lynn, the table needs setting, my mother announced, as Rachel regaled everyone with her promotion story for the 3rd time. I moved to the dining room, laying out Mom's good china with mechanical precision. Through the doorway, I could see Brian, now comfortably settled with a beer, discussing insurance rates with my brother-in-law. I'd met Brian during my senior year of college. He'd been confident, ambitious, full of plans. I'd been drawn to his certainty, his clear vision of the future. What I hadn't realized then was how little room that vision had for my own ambitions. "Do you need help, Mom?" Emma called from the basement stairs. Before I could answer, Rachel interjected, "Let her handle it, Em. That's what moms do best, right, Lynn?" The knowing smile she gave me made my skin crawl. The same smile she'd worn at my going-away party from Colburn, when she'd whispered, "I don't know how you could give up your career like that. I could never." As if I'd had a real choice. As if Brian hadn't made it clear that moving was non-negotiable. As if anyone had considered what I was sacrificing. I'd tried to maintain some connection to my professional identity over the years. Small freelance projects for local businesses, an online portfolio, the occasional networking event in Pittsfield. But it had always been secondary, something I squeezed in between carpools and grocery runs and family obligations. "Dinner's ready?" My mother's announcement set off a flurry of movement. I helped her carry dishes to the table while everyone else took their seats. "Lynn, you're at the end, dear," Mom directed, pointing to the seat furthest from the anniversary couple of honor. As plates were passed and wine was poured, conversations flowed around me. Rachel dominated as usual, with occasional interjections from Jason about his construction business. The kids talked among themselves, and Brian discussed the economy with my father. I sat quietly, pushing food around my plate, the email from Jessica burning in my mind. The opportunity it represented wasn't just professional. It was a chance to reclaim space in my own life, to shift the balance that had tipped so dramatically away from me. "So, Lynn," my father finally turned to me, "what have you been up to these days?" Before I could answer, Brian chuckled. "The usual domestic heroics, though she's been dabbling in some freelance stuff too. Nothing major." "Just a few local businesses," I said softly. "Social media campaigns, some content creation." "That's nice, dear," my mother nodded absently before turning to Rachel. "Now tell us more about that charity gala you're chairing." Rachel beamed. "It's going to be the event of the season. The governor might even attend." "Wow, Aunt Rachel, that's cool," Emma said, momentarily looking up from her phone. "Speaking of events," my mother continued, "we need to discuss Thanksgiving. I thought we could host again this year, but I'll need help. Lynn, you'll handle the cooking, of course." "I can't do Thanksgiving this year." The words left my mouth before I could stop them. The table fell silent. 8 pairs of eyes turned to me in surprise. "What do you mean you can't do it?" Brian asked, his forehead creasing with confusion. I took a deep breath. "I received a job offer today, from Colburn and Associates. It's a senior position with the tourism board account." More silence. "But that's in Pittsfield," Brian said slowly. "Yes, it is." Rachel laughed nervously. "You're not seriously considering it, are you? I mean, it's been, 15 years? The industry has completely changed." "I've kept up," I said quietly. "All those little freelance projects Brian mentioned, they've kept me current. Jessica specifically mentioned them in her email." "This is hardly the time to discuss this," my mother interjected, gesturing to the anniversary decorations hanging around us. "When would be a good time, Mom?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "When I'm not setting the table, or cooking the meal, or running the errands that everyone assumes I'll handle because my time isn't valuable." "Lynn," Brian warned, shooting me a look that I recognized all too well. The look that said, "Don't make a scene. Don't embarrass me." But something had broken loose inside me, like a dam finally giving way after years of pressure. "Do you know what I did before I drove here today?" I continued, looking around the table. "I picked up groceries, baked a cake, made a gluten-free dessert for Megan, who isn't actually gluten-free, got Dad's prescription, dropped off Mom's dry cleaning, and picked up the anniversary gift that we're all supposedly giving together, but that only I paid for." "We appreciate all you do," my father said uncomfortably. "Do you? Because in 15 years, not one of you has asked me if I miss my career, if I regret giving it up, if I want something more than being everyone's unpaid assistant." "That's not fair," Brian protested. "We agreed." "No, you decided," I corrected him. "You decided we'd move, you decided I'd stay home temporarily, and then you all just got comfortable with me handling everything while you pursued your goals." I turned to my children. "Emma, Aiden, when was the last time either of you thanked me for anything? When was the last time you offered to help without being asked?" Their faces flushed with guilt. "And Rachel," I continued, turning to my sister. Do you enjoy taking center stage while I work behind the scenes? Does it make you feel important to delegate tasks to me like I'm your employee? I don't do that, she protested weakly. You called me this morning to pick up Dad's medication that you could have gotten yesterday when you were literally at the same pharmacy. You do it all the time. The room was so quiet you could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. I'm taking the job, I said finally. I start in 3 weeks. But how will that even work? Brian sputtered. The commute is over an hour each way. It's remote with occasional office days. I'll be using the guest room as my office. What about the house? The kids' activities? All the things you handle? I looked at him steadily. That's what we need to figure out together, all of us, because I won't be available the way I have been. My mother's eyes had filled with tears. Lynn, I didn't realize you were so unhappy. I'm not unhappy, Mom. I'm invisible. There's a difference. I stood up, suddenly needing air. I'm going to step outside for a minute. When I come back, we can cut the anniversary cake. The regular one, not the gluten-free option that no one actually needs. The back porch was quiet, the evening air cool against my flushed skin. I sat on the steps, looking out at the yard where Rachel and I had played as children, where I'd always been the responsible one, the sensible one, while she took risks and claimed rewards. Our childhood roles had calcified into adulthood. Rachel, the vibrant one who pursued what she wanted unapologetically. Me, the steady one who made sure everyone else's needs were met first. But somewhere along the way, I'd stopped pursuing anything for myself. I'd become so accustomed to putting my desires last that I'd almost forgotten I had any. The door opened behind me. To my surprise, it was Emma, not Brian or my mother. Mom? She sat beside me, her teenage frame suddenly looking young and uncertain. I didn't know you gave up your job for us. It wasn't just for you, I said softly. It was a family decision, or it should have been. Dad never talks about it. No, he wouldn't. She was quiet for a moment. Are you leaving us? The question stunned me. God, no, Em. I'm just reclaiming part of myself. That doesn't mean I'm abandoning anyone. But you're angry at us. Not angry. Disappointed, maybe, and partly that's my fault. I never set boundaries. I never insisted on being seen. I turned to face her. But I need you to understand something. My value doesn't come from what I do for everyone else. And neither does yours. She nodded slowly. I can help more, with the house and stuff. That would be nice, but what I'd like even more is for you to see me as a whole person, not just as your mom. She looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. What was your job like? Before, I mean. The question caught me off guard. No one in the family ever asked about my previous career. I loved it, I said, surprised by the emotion in my voice. I worked with creative people, developed marketing strategies, helped businesses tell their stories. I was good at it. Why didn't you ever tell us? I did, when you were younger, but no one seemed interested, so I stopped. Emma frowned. That sucks. The simple teenage assessment made me laugh. Yeah, it does. Tell me more about the new job, she said. So I did. I told her about the tourism board account, about the campaigns I'd create to showcase the Berkshires, about the flexible schedule that would allow me to work from home most days. That sounds really cool, she said, and there was a new respect in her voice that warmed me. The door opened again, and Brian stepped out. Emma gave my hand a squeeze before going back inside, leaving us alone. He sat where she had been. You blindsided me in there. How is that different from you blindsiding me 15 years ago when you announced we were moving for your job? That was different. It was a huge opportunity. So is this, I countered. But the difference is, I'm not asking you to give anything up. I'm just not going to be the only one making sacrifices anymore. He was quiet for a long moment. I didn't realize you felt this way. You never asked. We've been comfortable, Lynn. The arrangement worked. It worked for you, I corrected, and for the kids, and for my parents, and for Rachel, everyone except me. He ran a hand through his hair, now sprinkled with gray. So what happens now? Now we renegotiate. The household responsibilities, the family obligations, all of it. And if I don't want to, I looked at him steadily, then we have a bigger problem than my new job. The question hung between us, heavy with implications. I built the business for us, he said finally, for our family. I know, and I appreciate that. But somewhere along the way, my contributions became expected rather than valued. I need that to change. He sighed, the stubborn set of his jaw softening slightly. It's going to be an adjustment. For everyone, I agreed. Inside, I could see my family through the window. They were gathered around the table, subdued but talking. My mother was cutting the cake, life continuing, but perhaps with a new awareness. I don't want to lose you, Brian said quietly. I don't want to be lost, I replied. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of 15 years between us. Finally, I stood up. Let's go back in. It's still Mom and Dad's anniversary. Brian nodded and followed me inside, where the family dynamics had subtly shifted. My father pulled out a chair for me near the head of the table. Rachel was quietly helping my mother serve cake. The twins were actually clearing dishes without being asked. Before we continue, my father said as we all settled with cake, I'd like to make a toast. He raised his glass. To 45 years with this wonderful woman, he nodded to my mother, and to new beginnings for our daughter Lynn. I felt tears prick my eyes as glasses were raised. And Lynn, my mother added, I'm sorry we've taken you for granted, all of us. Rachel nodded, looking uncharacteristically humble. I've been a bulldozer, haven't I? Sometimes, I admitted. But I let you. Well, not anymore, she said with a small smile. And I want to hear about this job. Sounds like they really want you. For the first time that evening, the conversation centered on me, my accomplishments, my future. I shared details about the position, about the projects I'd be working on, about the excitement I felt at returning to an industry I'd loved. As the night wound down and we prepared to leave, something had fundamentally changed. Not just in how my family saw me, but in how I saw myself. The invisible woman had stepped into the light. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparation and negotiation. Brian and I had several long, sometimes difficult conversations about redistributing household responsibilities. The twins grumbled initially about their expanded chore list, but fell in line when Brian made it clear this wasn't optional. I cleared out the guest room, transforming it into a proper home office with a desk I'd found at an antique store in Lee, a comfortable chair, and a large monitor. Brian surprised me with one evening. I want you to have what you need, he'd said, setting up the equipment with unexpected enthusiasm. My parents were adjusting too, though more slowly. Dad still called with emergencies that weren't really emergencies, but now I had the confidence to say, I can come by this weekend, but not today. Mom had started asking Rachel to help more with family events, and to everyone's surprise, Rachel had stepped up. The Sunday before my first day, I met Jessica for coffee in Pittsfield. She looked much the same as she had 15 years ago, sharp, confident, with a new streak of silver in her dark hair that only added to her authority. The team is excited to have you, she said. Your perspective living in the region will be invaluable for the tourism account. I'm nervous, I admitted. It's been so long, she laughed. Please, you've been doing marketing work all along, just without the salary and title. And from what I've seen of your freelance portfolio, you've kept up with industry changes better than some of our full-time staff. Her confidence in me was a balm to my lingering insecurities. Thank you for reaching out to me, I said. It came at exactly the right moment. I've been following your work for years, she confessed. Just waiting for the right opportunity to snag you back. We spent the next hour discussing the project, the team, and my role. By the time we parted, the nervous flutter in my stomach had transformed into excitement. At home, I found Brian helping Aiden with college applications in the living room while Emma tackled a load of laundry. How was your meeting? Brian asked, looking up from the paperwork. Great, I said. The project is even more interesting than I thought. Does this mean we're having takeout for dinner? Aiden asked hopefully. I laughed. Actually, your dad's cooking tonight. I found a recipe for that chicken dish you like, Brian said. No promises on execution, but I'm giving it a shot. The gesture touched me. It wasn't perfect, I'd probably still end up helping, but it was a genuine effort, a tangible acknowledgement of the changes we were making. That night, as Brian and I got ready for bed, he watched me set out my clothes for the next day. Not the casual wear I'd lived in for years, but a smart blouse and trousers appropriate for video meetings. You look happy, he observed. I am, I said, realizing it was true. I'm sorry it took me so long to see what you needed, he said, the words clearly difficult for him. I got comfortable with the way things were. We both did, I acknowledged, but we're figuring it out now. The next morning, I sat in my newly organized home office, a space that had once been the dumping ground for everyone else's overflow. Now it was mine, clean, professional, with a view of the backyard where Aiden was mowing the lawn without being asked. My computer dinged with an incoming video call from Jessica. "Ready for your first team meeting?" she asked with a warm smile. "More than ready," I replied. From downstairs, I could hear Brian starting the coffee maker, part of our new division of household labor. Emma called up that she'd made breakfast for everyone. As I joined the video call and introduced myself to my new team, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 15 years, the perfect alignment of all parts of myself. Mother, wife, daughter, sister, and now, once again, professional. I wasn't just Lynn the Reliable anymore. I was Lynn Pearson, complete.